James had it all, or so he believed. On a sweltering summer night in an upscale neighborhood, the clock struck midnight, and everything changed. In his elegant mansion, lit only by the subdued glow of interior lamps and streetlights filtering through tall windows, James stood resolute and unfeeling. With a voice as cold as the night air, he declared to his wife Danielle that she was replaceable. In one merciless moment, he forced her out the front door, discarding her like an unwanted relic. Danielle, an African-American woman of warm caramel-toned skin, expressive dark brown eyes, and medium-length curly hair that framed her dignified face, could barely believe the words. The shock was profound, but rather than cry or beg, she stood tall, gathering only the clothes on her back. Every step she took on the cool pavement marked the beginning of a painful exodus from a life she once shared with James. The grandeur of the home behind her was suddenly tarnished by betrayal. The welcoming light of the foyer had been replaced by the bitter sting of abandonment. Inside, James felt a surge of self-righteous triumph as he embraced a new beginning with Vanessa, his much younger mistress, who had claimed to be pregnant. In his modern, stylish apartment, he boasted of his upgrade to anyone who would listen, showering Vanessa with lavish gifts and speaking with a self-assured arrogance that masked his cruelty. He believed that by discarding Danielle, he was clearing the path to an opulent future. Yet, amid his celebration, an unseen force stirred in the darkness. For every dismissive word he uttered, the wheels of fate began to turn. The night air was heavy as Danielle walked away from the mansion. The familiar scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass mingled with a cold, bitter gust that seemed to echo the injustice of the moment. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of grief and a nascent resolve that promised she would someday reclaim her lost dignity. In every measured step, she vowed silently that her pain would forge a new future, one that would eventually bring retribution upon the man who had discarded her without remorse. As the city's distant lights flickered like fragile hope, Danielle's silhouette merged with the shadows. The betrayal was absolute, yet in that solitary journey under the indifferent stars, she began to feel a stirring, a spark of inner strength that would eventually become an unstoppable force. Unbeknownst to James, the scales of karma had already begun to tip. The universe was already setting in motion a series of events that would transform his life into a cautionary tale of cruelty and regret. As Danielle's figure receded into the night, a single tear glistened under a street lamp, a silent promise that her comeback and his inevitable downfall were already in motion. The bitter night of abandonment had cast Danielle into a world she scarcely recognized. With nothing left but her shattered pride and the clothes on her back, she sought refuge with her lifelong friend, Melissa. In Melissa's modest apartment, a small haven filled with warm light, home-cooked aromas, and the gentle murmur of supportive conversation, Danielle began the arduous process of rebuilding her life. Though the sting of betrayal was fresh, every comforting word from Melissa rekindled a fragile hope within her. By day, Danielle took on a low-paying job at a small firm. The work was grueling and unappreciated, yet each mundane task became a small victory against the darkness that had overtaken her. Every morning, as she dressed in her simple attire and stepped into the drab world of her new routine, she resolved to reclaim the dignity that James had so callously stolen. Her warm, caramel-toned skin, though marred by sorrow, shone with a quiet determination. Her expressive eyes, filled with unshed tears, now also glimmered with a resolve to rebuild from rock bottom. At work, the challenges were relentless. She was often overlooked and undervalued, yet every moment of perseverance chipped away at the weight of her past. In quiet moments, Danielle would retreat into herself, drawing strength from the memory of what she had lost, and more importantly, from the promise of what she could become. With every rejection and each small triumph, her inner fire grew, even if her external world remained bleak. Meanwhile, in stark contrast, James reveled in the life he had chosen. In a sleek, modern penthouse, he flaunted his newfound freedom with Vanessa. Lavish dinners, expensive gifts, and a constant parade of luxury were his new reality, a reality that James believed would fill the void left by Danielle's departure. But as the days passed, his superficial celebrations only deepened the emptiness of his choices. In the solitude of her new existence, Danielle nurtured her silent strength. Each hardship at her low-paying job became a lesson. Each act of kindness from Melissa, a reminder that she was not defined by her loss. She began saving every dollar and dreaming of a future where her resilience would transform into empowerment. Though the world around her seemed indifferent, the quiet determination in her heart was building an unbreakable foundation for her comeback. One rainy evening, as Danielle locked the door to her modest apartment and looked up at a stormy sky, she whispered a promise to herself, a vow that the pain of her past would fuel her rise to power, and that one day, James would rue the day he cast her aside. Within the opulent confines of James's new penthouse, the veneer of luxury began to crack. Vanessa, the young mistress who once charmed him with gentle smiles and tender promises, slowly revealed her true nature. At first, the lavish gifts and glittering nights had masked her ulterior motives, but as the weeks rolled on, her demands grew increasingly extravagant, and her demeanor, once soft and affectionate, hardened into cold calculation. The penthouse, adorned with expensive art and modern furnishings, became a stage for Vanessa's transformation. Her caramel-toned skin glowed under the ambient lighting, but her eyes, once warm, took on a steely edge. Vanessa began to insist on luxury items that were far beyond what James had ever dreamed of purchasing. She demanded that every asset, every possession be transferred into her name. In heated arguments that echoed through the marble halls, her voice rang with an urgency that bordered on tyranny. "Show me that you can provide, or you'll lose everything." James, initially intoxicated by the allure of a fresh start, began to notice subtle shifts. The romance that had once colored his relationship with Vanessa was replaced by a transactional coldness. Expensive receipts piled up on a designer table, lavish parties turned into silent displays of power and greed. The penthouse, which once symbolized the promise of a new beginning, became a gilded cage from which there was no escape. Every luxurious dinner and every extravagant outing further isolated James from the man he used to be. Internally, James struggled with a creeping sense of doubt. The mansion that once stood as a monument to his ambitions now reeked of betrayal and manipulation. His heart, heavy with regret, began to question whether the price of his new life was worth the loss of true love. Yet, entrapped by his own desires, he continued down the path that Vanessa had paved with insidious promises. Vanessa, for her part, grew bolder with each passing day. The more James indulged her, the more she demanded: luxury cars, designer jewelry, and even control over his business decisions. Her transformation was stark. The gentle mistress was replaced by a power-hungry woman whose true colors were impossible to hide. In hushed conversations, James admitted to himself that her ambition was suffocating him, yet he was too far gone to extricate himself from her grasp. On a stormy night, as thunder rumbled outside the expansive windows of the penthouse, James discovered a pile of expensive receipts and invoices scattered across a polished table, a tangible reminder that Vanessa's greed was not only draining his wealth, but also eroding the very foundations of the life he once cherished. In that moment, the darkness in their relationship grew undeniable, setting the stage for his impending downfall. A decade had passed since the night of betrayal, and the tides of fate had turned dramatically. Danielle, once discarded and broken, had transformed into a formidable figure, a beacon of resilience and empowerment. Now a renowned businesswoman, she had built a thriving empire from the ashes of her past. Every challenge she faced had only honed her strength, and her warm caramel-toned skin shone with confidence and renewed purpose. Her expressive dark eyes, once filled with sorrow, now radiated determination and wisdom. In her modern high-rise office, Danielle presided over a bustling enterprise that stood as a testament to her triumph over adversity. The sleek lines of her workspace, the polished glass tables, and the vibrant art adorning the walls spoke of success. Here, every decision was calculated, and every achievement was a victory over the pain of betrayal. Her transformation was not merely a personal renaissance. It was a revolution. Every business deal and every strategic move reinforced the message that no act of cruelty goes unpunished. Yet, perhaps the most striking symbol of her resurgence was her son, Marcus. Abandoned by James, Marcus had grown into a brilliant tech CEO whose visionary leadership complemented his mother's business acumen. Together, they formed an indomitable partnership that spanned industries from technology to finance. Their united front served as a living reminder that what was once broken could be rebuilt into something powerful and unstoppable. Back in stark contrast, James's world was falling apart. His lavish lifestyle, once defined by opulence and careless indulgence, was now marred by financial ruin. Vanessa's insatiable greed had drained his wealth, and a series of disastrous investments and lawsuits further stripped him of his former glory. Every day, the opulent penthouse that had once symbolized his success now stood as a monument to his folly, echoing with the ghosts of his past mistakes. As Danielle's empire grew, so too did the whispers of inevitable retribution. In board meetings and press conferences, her calm authority silenced critics and earned her accolades. Every triumph was a quiet rebuke to James, a reminder that the woman he had discarded was now soaring high on wings forged in the flames of betrayal. Her success was a beacon of hope and a promise of justice. One crisp morning, as Danielle meticulously reviewed her quarterly reports in her corner office with the city sprawling beneath her, her phone buzzed with a mysterious notification. The message hinted at a secret from James's past, one that would soon tip the scales of karma even further against him. In that charged moment, Danielle sensed that the final reckoning was drawing near. As the years wore on, the consequences of James's choices began to catch up with him. His life, once a dazzling display of wealth and arrogance, started to crumble under the relentless pressure of bad investments and legal battles. The opulent penthouse that had been a sanctuary of indulgence now felt like a prison of regret. Every day brought a new setback, a lawsuit here, a failed venture there, gradually eroding the facade of success he had so meticulously built. Vanessa, the mistress who had promised him an upgraded life, turned out to be nothing more than a merciless opportunist. As his fortune dwindled, she became increasingly unpredictable. What once were lavish displays of affection transformed into cold, calculated demands for more luxury that James could no longer afford. In a cruel twist of fate, Vanessa began to stray, seeking solace in the arms of others, while leaving James to face the mounting bills alone. The signs of collapse were everywhere. James's bank statements, once overflowing with promise, now revealed a series of steep losses. Expensive possessions were liquidated, and the extravagant parties that had once defined his social circle became distant memories. With each passing day, he watched helplessly as his empire of deceit disintegrated before his eyes. Inside, James was haunted by the memory of the night he cast Danielle aside. The echo of her determined steps, the solitary tear that had glistened under the streetlights, now returned to him as an incessant reminder of his unforgivable betrayal. His once arrogant confidence was replaced by a gnawing despair. Late nights were spent poring over legal notices and failed investments, each document a testament to his self-inflicted downfall. As his financial ruin became undeniable, the pressure mounted to a breaking point. One cold, rain-soaked afternoon, while James sat in his nearly empty penthouse surrounded by the remnants of a lost life, scattered bank statements, shattered dreams, and a pervasive sense of defeat, a sudden, insistent knock sounded at the door. The sound reverberated through the vacant halls like a prelude to further calamity. With his heart pounding and his mind clouded by despair, James hesitated before answering the door, unaware that this knock would signal the beginning of an even deeper descent, a turning point that would irrevocably alter the course of his life. Now completely stripped of his former wealth and reputation, James was forced to embark on a desperate job search. The man who had once commanded respect in the boardrooms of high society now found himself an outcast, a pariah whose name was whispered with disdain. Former colleagues and business partners shunned him, and the echoes of his betrayal spread like wildfire. With every rejection, his hope dwindled, yet a stubborn flicker of desperation urged him forward. One chilly morning, James found himself in the imposing lobby of a prestigious corporation. The building's sleek, modern lines and polished glass surfaces were a stark reminder of the opportunity he now so desperately needed. Clad in a threadbare suit that barely concealed his once confident posture, he stepped into the reception area with a mix of determination and trepidation. Every corner of the grand building seemed to whisper of a second chance, a chance to rebuild what he had lost. Inside the sterile conference room, James recounted his previous achievements with a rehearsed confidence. However, every question from the stern interview panel felt like a probe into his darkest secrets. The room's cool, modern decor did little to mask the oppressive weight of judgment. Unbeknownst to James, whispers of his past misdeeds had reached the highest echelons of the company, and one executive in particular bore a connection to his history that would soon come to light. As the interview progressed, James's voice wavered, and his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Every answer, no matter how well rehearsed, was punctuated by the silent disapproval of the panel. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly heavy, as if each passing second added another layer of scrutiny. James left the room with a bitter taste of regret, mingled with a faint glimmer of hope that perhaps he might salvage a fragment of his dignity. As he walked back into the corridor, his heart pounding in his chest, James caught a glimpse of a familiar face among the executives. A face that promised to shatter the fragile hope he clung to, signaling that his darkest secrets were far from buried. James's second interview was nothing short of a nightmare, a relentless trial that exposed every crack in his crumbling facade. The boardroom was immaculate, its long, polished table reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting that lent an almost clinical air to the proceedings. Seated at one end was the CEO, whose deep-set, piercing eyes radiated a calm yet unyielding authority. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an expectancy that made every second drag like an eternity. The interview began routinely, with polite greetings and standard questions. However, as the minutes ticked by, the tone shifted. The CEO's voice, cool and measured, cut through the silence with a question that sent shockwaves through James's soul. "Tell me, why should I hire the man who threw his wife out like garbage?" The words reverberated in the room like a death knell. Time seemed to freeze as James's face paled and his mind raced to find an answer. The boardroom, with its cold, sterile surfaces and unyielding glare, became a stage for his public humiliation. Each attempt to regain his composure was met with an implacable silence from the panel. The CEO's relentless gaze penetrated every defense James tried to muster, exposing the deep-seated regret and shame that lay beneath his rehearsed words. Every question that followed felt like a carefully aimed jab, stripping away layers of his dignity. His voice faltered under the weight of his own past misdeeds, and every pause in the conversation filled the room with suffocating tension. Colleagues on the panel exchanged silent glances that spoke of disapproval, leaving James to bear the crushing burden of his decisions. The final remark from the CEO, delivered in a tone as cold as ice, sealed his fate. "This is the man who abandoned his wife. What hope is there for you?" In that heart-wrenching moment, James's carefully constructed image crumbled entirely, leaving him exposed and broken. As he left the boardroom, each step felt heavier than the last, the corridors echoing with the weight of his humiliation. With the CEO's scathing words still echoing in his ears, James stepped into the corridor, a man shattered by his past, with the horrifying realization that his future was slipping irrevocably away. Just as James struggled to collect the fragments of his shattered pride, the door to the boardroom swung open with a force that commanded attention. In strode Danielle, no longer the broken woman he had so callously discarded, but a transformed symbol of power and redemption. Clad in impeccably tailored business attire that accentuated her graceful yet commanding presence, Danielle's warm, caramel-toned skin radiated resilience. Her dark, expressive eyes burned with a fierce determination that silenced the room as she approached. The CEO and executives, already witnessing James's downfall, fell into an awed silence as Danielle took her place at the head of the room. With deliberate calm, she leaned forward and, in a voice that was both soft and devastating, whispered, "You didn't just lose your wife, James. You lost your entire future." Those words, laden with years of accumulated pain and hard-won strength, reverberated around the room like a final judgment. For a long, harrowing moment, James was paralyzed. The memory of that fateful night, the callous dismissal, the tear that glistened in the darkness, came crashing back, and he realized with gut-wrenching clarity that his past was now an inescapable present. The boardroom, once a scene of corporate proceedings, transformed into a stage for retribution. Danielle's quiet, unyielding presence, coupled with the steady gaze of Marcus, her son and a brilliant tech CEO, sealed the dramatic reversal of fortunes. Together, they embodied the power of resilience and the certainty of karma. The silence was suffocating as Danielle's words hung in the air, a razor-sharp indictment of James's cruelty. His arrogant facade, meticulously constructed over years of indulgence, crumbled under the weight of her revelation. Every eye in the room bore witness to the undeniable truth. James's betrayal had cost him everything, and there was no turning back. As Danielle's final words faded, "You lost your future," James slumped in his chair, his face a portrait of regret and despair. In that charged moment, the inevitability of his ruin became painfully clear, setting the stage for further calamity in the chapters yet to come. When James believed his humiliation was complete, fate struck again with devastating force. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, as he languished in the remnants of his shattered life, the sound of blaring sirens shattered the fragile silence. Without warning, FBI agents in tactical gear stormed the building where James had taken refuge. The cold, metallic echoes of their boots filled the hallways as they advanced with unyielding determination. Within minutes, chaos overtook the sparse corridors. James, once a man of arrogance and opulence, found himself surrounded. The agents, faces impassive and voices measured, began reading him his rights with chilling precision. The charges were grave: fraud and money laundering, accusations that left him reeling. In a twist that was almost too cruel to bear, it was revealed that Vanessa had never been pregnant. Instead, she had orchestrated an elaborate scheme, funneling money through James's offshore accounts for illegal real estate deals, leaving him the unwitting fall guy. As the agents secured him in handcuffs, James's eyes darted frantically, searching for any escape that wasn't there. His once luxurious penthouse now lay abandoned and silent, a stark reminder of the empire he had built on deceit. The agents' firm grip and the cold corridors of the building underscored the finality of his fate. Every step away from that place was a step deeper into ruin. The once mighty figure, whose arrogance had once defined him, now wore the unmistakable mask of regret and terror. The world around him, indifferent and unforgiving, offered no solace. His mind replayed the betrayals, the night he discarded Danielle, the ceaseless demands of Vanessa, and now the crushing weight of his own crimes. The downfall was complete, and his desperate hope was replaced by the bitter realization that his past had finally caught up with him. As James was led out into the cold daylight by stern FBI agents, one final, piercing look from an agent seemed to whisper, "Your time is up." In that moment, the inescapable truth of his downfall became all too real, a fate sealed by betrayal and inevitable retribution. The final act of this modern tragedy unfolded behind the unforgiving bars of a prison cell, where James was reduced to a shadow of the man he once was. In the cold, gray solitude of his confinement, every echo of his past misdeeds resounded like a relentless drumbeat. Gone was the arrogant boss who had ruled his world with cruelty and disdain. In his place was a broken man, haunted by the inescapable weight of his own betrayal. Day after day, as the clock ticked relentlessly, James was forced to confront the bitter reality of his downfall. The sterile prison walls offered no comfort, only a constant reminder that no act of treachery went unpunished. On a small, flickering TV mounted in the corner of his cell, images of Marcus, now a triumphant tech CEO, flashed across the screen. Each success on that screen was a dagger to his pride, a living testament to the empire he had destroyed through his own hubris. In a desperate bid for redemption, James reached out to Danielle, the very woman he had once callously cast aside. With trembling hands and a voice choked with regret, he pleaded for mercy, a final attempt to reclaim even a sliver of the life he had squandered. But Danielle, now the embodiment of strength and dignity, met his plea with a cold, knowing smile. "You threw me out in the cold once," she said simply, her tone devoid of pity. "Now it's your turn." Her words, crisp and final, sealed his fate like a judge's sentence. In the oppressive silence of his cell, a fellow inmate leaned over and whispered with mocking finality, "Damn, man, how you fumbled both a queen and a kingdom." The words echoed through the confines of his prison world, a constant reminder that karma had indeed been served cold. As James closed his eyes, the full weight of regret and despair crashed over him, leaving him with nothing but the endless torment of his past misdeeds. And that, my friends, is what we call karma at its finest. Do you think James deserved this ending? Or should Danielle have been more forgiving? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Laine, because trust me, you won't see the next twist coming.